Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen when someone believes in themselves more than the world believes in them. Sometimes it takes just one person's laughter to fuel a fire that burns brighter than anyone imagined possible. This is the story of Maria Santos, a 23-year-old woman from a small town in Texas, who walked into a crowded gymnasium on a Tuesday evening and changed everything people thought they knew about limits, about expectations, and about what happens when determination meets opportunity. What happened that night didn't just break a record. It shattered assumptions, silenced critics, and proved that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person who will leave them speechless. This is the true story of how one moment of mockery became the catalyst for something extraordinary, and how 5 simple words, "Watch me do it anyway," became the battle cry that echoed around the world. The record that stood for 12 years vanished in seconds. But the impact of what happened that night would last a lifetime. Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished her morning run through the dusty streets of Cedar Valley, Texas. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood where she had spent her entire 23 years. Most people her age had already left this small town of 8,000 people, heading off to big cities with big dreams. But Maria had stayed, working at the local hardware store during the day and training every evening at the community center gym. Cedar Valley wasn't the kind of place where dreams came true. It was the kind of place where people settled for good enough, where the biggest excitement was Friday night football games at the high school, and where everyone knew everyone else's business. Maria's neighbors thought she was wasting her time with all that training. Her own family had stopped asking about her goals months ago, tired of hearing about records and competitions that seemed as distant as the moon. The community center gym was nothing special. Old equipment that squeaked and groaned, fluorescent lights that flickered, and a concrete floor that had seen better days. But it was where Maria spent 3 hours every evening after work, pushing herself harder than anyone else in town pushed themselves for anything. She had discovered her unusual talent by accident 2 years earlier, during a company picnic challenge that was meant to be just for fun. That day, someone had brought a stopwatch and dared anyone to try beating the local high school record. Maria had laughed it off at first, but something inside her was curious. She had always been athletic in an unconventional way, with quick reflexes and an ability to focus intensely when something mattered to her. When she tried the challenge, people stopped talking and started staring. The time on that stopwatch was better than the high school record by a significant margin. Word spread quickly in a small town like Cedar Valley. Within a week, everyone knew about Maria's unexpected ability. Some people were impressed, others were skeptical, and a few were downright dismissive. But Maria couldn't stop thinking about that moment, about the feeling of everything clicking into place perfectly. She started researching online, watching videos, and learning everything she could about technique and training. The more she learned, the more she realized that what had happened at the company picnic wasn't just beginner's luck. She had natural talent, but, more importantly, she had something that couldn't be taught: an unwavering focus and determination that kicked in when pressure mounted. Every evening after closing the hardware store, she would drive to the community center and practice until they turned off the lights. Her boss at the hardware store, Mr. Peterson, was one of the few people who encouraged her training. He had been a track coach in his younger days and recognized something special in Maria's dedication. He would let her leave work 15 minutes early on training days, and sometimes he would even come to the gym to offer technical advice. But even Mr. Peterson had his doubts about how far Maria could really go. The state record had stood for 12 years, set by Jennifer Walsh at the University of Texas. Jennifer had gone on to compete nationally and had become something of a legend in Texas athletic circles. The record she set in 2012 was considered virtually unbreakable by local standards. Coaches at major universities had tried for years to find someone who could even come close to Jennifer's mark, but no one had managed to get within 5% of her time. Maria had printed out information about Jennifer's record and taped it to her bathroom mirror. Every morning when she brushed her teeth, she saw those numbers staring back at her. 47.23 seconds. It had become the focal point of everything she did, the goal that drove her through 6-hour shifts at the hardware store and 3-hour training sessions at the community center. The people of Cedar Valley started to pay attention to Maria's training, but not in the way she had hoped. Instead of support, she often heard whispers of doubt and gentle suggestions that she should find a more realistic hobby. Her own mother, Carmen, worried that Maria was setting herself up for disappointment. Her father, Miguel, worked long hours at the oil refinery and came home too tired to discuss his daughter's athletic ambitions. Maria's younger brother, Carlos, was the only family member who truly believed in her potential. He had just graduated high school and worked part-time at the local grocery store. Every evening, he would drive to the community center to time Maria's practice runs and offer encouragement. Carlos had seen his sister's transformation over the past 2 years, from someone who seemed content with small-town life to someone with fire in her eyes and purpose in every step. The local newspaper, the Cedar Valley Chronicle, had written a small feature about Maria's training 6 months earlier. The headline read "Local Woman Chases Impossible Dream," and, while the article was meant to be supportive, the tone suggested that Maria's goals were admirable but unrealistic. The article mentioned that she was training hard and hoping for the best, which made it sound like she was relying on luck rather than skill and preparation. Reading that article had stung, but it also fueled something fierce inside Maria. She cut it out and added it to the collection of motivational materials she kept in a folder labeled Proof. The folder contained printouts of training schedules, technique articles, nutrition guides, and photos of athletes who had overcome long odds to achieve their goals. But, mostly, it contained reminders of every time someone had suggested she should lower her expectations. The community center gym was run by Frank Morrison, a former college football player who had returned to Cedar Valley to raise his family. Frank had been initially skeptical of Maria's training regimen, but he couldn't argue with her dedication. She never missed a session, never made excuses, and never left without giving everything she had. Gradually, Frank became one of her strongest supporters, even volunteering to help her develop more advanced training techniques. Frank had connections to the regional athletic community through his college days, and he started making phone calls on Maria's behalf. He learned about upcoming competitions, qualification requirements, and the process for getting official times recorded. What he discovered both excited and intimidated him. The competition Maria wanted to enter was scheduled for March 15 at the University of Houston Gymnasium, just 6 weeks away. The entry requirements for the competition were straightforward but demanding. Participants needed to provide evidence of a qualifying time achieved within the past year at a certified venue with certified timekeeping equipment. The community center gym wasn't certified, and the stopwatch Carlos used wasn't official equipment. If Maria wanted to compete, she would need to travel somewhere with proper facilities and prove she belonged in the same arena as college athletes and regional champions. Frank made some phone calls and found that the nearest certified facility was at Southwest Texas State University, about 3 hours away in San Marcos. They held monthly time trials for local athletes, and the next one was scheduled for the following Saturday. The entry fee was $50, and participants needed to bring their own certified coach or trainer to verify their attempt. Maria had been working at the hardware store for 3 years, saving money for a car down payment that never seemed to get any closer. The $50 entry fee represented 2 days of work after taxes, and the gas money for the trip to San Marcos would cost almost as much. But she didn't hesitate. She asked Mr. Peterson if she could have Saturday off, even though it was the store's busiest day, and she asked Frank if he would be willing to make the trip as her certified trainer. The week leading up to the time trial felt like the longest week of Maria's life. Every training session took on added importance, every technical detail demanded perfection, and every conversation seemed to include someone's opinion about her chances. The hardware store customers had heard about her upcoming trial, and their reactions ranged from genuine encouragement to thinly veiled skepticism. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had known Maria since childhood, stopped by the hardware store on Thursday afternoon specifically to talk about the time trial. She meant well, but her words carried the weight of small-town wisdom that often prioritized caution over ambition. She suggested that Maria should be proud of how far she had come already, and that success didn't always mean achieving the impossible. It was the kind of advice that sounded supportive but felt like permission to quit. Maria's training session that Thursday evening was one of her best ever. Everything felt smooth and controlled, her timing was perfect, and Carlos's stopwatch showed numbers that made both siblings look at each other in amazement. If those numbers were accurate, and if Maria could reproduce them under official conditions, she would not only qualify for the competition but she would also set a new personal best by a substantial margin. Frank watched Maria's Thursday session with growing excitement and nervousness. He had coached high school football for 10 years before moving to Cedar Valley, and he recognized the signs of an athlete approaching peak performance. Maria's technique had evolved dramatically over the past months, but, more importantly, her mental preparation had reached a level of focus that impressed him. She wasn't just physically ready for Saturday's trial, she was mentally prepared for whatever challenges awaited her. The drive to San Marcos on Saturday morning was quiet but charged with nervous energy. Maria sat in the passenger seat of Frank's truck, reviewing her technique notes and visualizing perfect execution. Frank tried to keep the conversation light, but he could see the intensity building in Maria's eyes. This wasn't just a time trial for her, it was validation of 2 years of dedication and the first step toward proving that small-town dreams could compete with university-level athletics. Southwest Texas State University's athletic facility was impressive compared to the Cedar Valley Community Center. Proper lane markings, certified timing equipment, and an atmosphere of serious athletic competition. Maria felt both intimidated and energized as she registered for the time trial and received her participant number. The other athletes warming up around the facility looked like they belonged there in a way that Maria wasn't sure she did. The official in charge of timing introduced himself as Coach Williams and explained the procedures for certified trials. Each participant would get 2 attempts, with the better time being recorded as their official mark. The timing equipment was computer-controlled and accurate to the 100th of a second, eliminating any doubt about the validity of recorded times. Most importantly for Maria, a qualifying time at this trial would be accepted for entry into any regional competition. As Maria went through her warm-up routine, she noticed other athletes glancing in her direction with curiosity. She wasn't wearing university gear or expensive training equipment, and Frank didn't look like the kind of high-powered coach who usually accompanied serious competitors. But Maria had learned to use doubt as fuel, and she could feel her focus sharpening as the moment of truth approached. The time trial would determine not just whether Maria qualified for the competition, but whether 2 years of training in a small-town gym had prepared her to compete against athletes with every advantage she had never had. Everything she had worked for came down to the next few minutes. The warm-up area at Southwest Texas State University buzzed with quiet intensity as Maria went through her preparation routine. She could hear fragments of conversations from other athletes, discussions about training programs, university coaches, and competition strategies that sounded foreign to someone who had learned everything from YouTube videos and library books. But Maria had something these athletes might not have had: hunger born from being underestimated and determination forged in a community center gym where every improvement had to be earned. Frank stood nearby, trying to project confidence while fighting his own nervous energy. He had coached many athletes over the years, but never one with so much riding on a single performance. Maria's future in competitive athletics would be determined by what happened in the next hour, and Frank knew that no amount of encouragement could substitute for the mental toughness Maria would need to execute under pressure. Coach Williams called the participants together for final instructions. There were 8 athletes signed up for the time trial, ranging from current university students to post-graduation competitors still chasing regional qualifying times. Maria was the only participant not affiliated with a formal athletic program, and several athletes looked surprised when Frank introduced himself as her trainer from Cedar Valley Community Center. The trials would proceed in order of registration, with each athlete getting their 2 attempts before the next person began. Maria had registered third, which meant she would compete after watching 2 other athletes set the standard for the day. Part of her wanted to go first to avoid building up more nervous energy, but another part was grateful for the chance to observe the technique and timing of her competitors. The first athlete, a junior from UT San Antonio named Derek, approached his starting position with the confidence of someone who had done this dozens of times. His university-issued training gear and professional demeanor marked him as exactly the kind of athlete Maria would be competing against if she qualified for regionals. Derek's first attempt was smooth and technically sound, resulting in a time of 52.18 seconds. It was a respectable mark that would easily qualify for regional competition, but it was also more than 4 seconds slower than Jennifer Walsh's record. Derek's second attempt was slightly faster at 51.94 seconds, and he seemed satisfied with the improvement. Coach Williams recorded the time officially, and Derek joined his coach in the observation area to watch the remaining competitors. Maria noticed that Derek's technique was textbook perfect but seemed to lack the explosive element that separated good times from great times. The second competitor was Lisa Chen, a graduate student from Rice University who had been competing for 6 years. Lisa's approach was methodical and calculated, with every movement precisely controlled. Her first attempt resulted in 50.33 seconds, which drew appreciative murmurs from the other competitors. Lisa was clearly operating at a higher level than Derek, with technique refined by years of professional coaching and competition experience. Lisa's second attempt was even more impressive. Her time of 49.87 seconds put her within 3 seconds of Jennifer Walsh's record, closer than Maria had expected anyone to get. The other competitors congratulated Lisa on an excellent performance, and Maria realized that the competition level she was entering was significantly higher than what she had imagined during her training sessions in Cedar Valley. As Maria prepared for her first attempt, Frank offered final words of encouragement that focused on execution rather than results. He reminded her that she had achieved comparable times during training, and that the only difference today was the official timing equipment and the pressure of competition. Frank had learned over the years that athletes performed best when they focused on process rather than outcome, especially during high-pressure situations like qualification trials. Maria took her position at the starting line, feeling the weight of 2 years of preparation condensing into this single moment. The certified timing equipment seemed more intimidating than Carlos's stopwatch, but Maria forced herself to focus on the familiar elements of her technique. She had practiced her starting position thousands of times, and muscle memory would guide her through the sequence she had perfected in the Cedar Valley Community Center. Coach Williams provided the standard countdown sequence, and Maria felt time slow down as she waited for the signal to begin. Everything she had worked for, every evening of training, every moment of doubt from neighbors and family members, came down to the next 48 seconds of her life. The gymnasium fell silent except for the sound of Maria's controlled breathing and the barely audible hum of the timing equipment. The signal came, and Maria exploded from the starting position with more intensity than she had ever managed during practice. The combination of adrenaline and perfect preparation created a flow state where technique became instinctive and effort felt effortless. She could hear Frank shouting encouragement from the sideline, but his voice seemed to come from very far away as Maria's entire focus narrowed to the task at hand. Time seemed both frozen and accelerated as Maria moved through her sequence. Each phase of her performance felt perfectly controlled, but she was moving faster than she had ever moved before. The other competitors had stopped their conversations and were watching intently as Maria demonstrated technique that looked nothing like textbook form but was clearly producing exceptional results. When Maria crossed the finish line, she immediately looked toward Coach Williams and the timing equipment for confirmation of her time. The digital display showed 48.91 seconds, a result that caused complete silence in the gymnasium for several seconds before Frank erupted in celebration. Maria had not only qualified for regional competition, she had come within a second and a half of Jennifer Walsh's 12-year-old record. The other competitors approached Maria with congratulations that mixed genuine admiration with obvious surprise. Lisa Chen, who had been the clear favorite just minutes earlier, seemed particularly impressed by Maria's unconventional technique and the intensity she had brought to her first attempt. Derek admitted that he had never seen anyone improve so dramatically between training and official competition. Coach Williams verified the time and asked Maria if she wanted to proceed with her second attempt. Under normal circumstances, Maria would have gladly accepted a qualifying time of 48.91 seconds and saved her energy for future competitions. But something had clicked during her first attempt, a combination of preparation and opportunity that might not occur again. Maria looked at Frank, who nodded his approval, and decided to attempt an even faster time. The atmosphere in the gymnasium had changed completely during the break between Maria's attempts. The other athletes and coaches gathered closer to watch, sensing that they might witness something special. Maria's first attempt had been impressive enough to command respect, but her second attempt would determine whether she was a legitimate contender for Jennifer Walsh's record or simply a talented athlete having one exceptional day. Maria's preparation for her second attempt was more relaxed than her first. The pressure of qualification had been eliminated, replaced by the freedom to pursue excellence without the fear of failure. Frank reminded her that she had already achieved her primary goal for the day, and that her second attempt was an opportunity to explore her true potential without the weight of expectation. As Maria took her position for the second time, she felt completely different than she had 20 minutes earlier. The nervous energy had been replaced by quiet confidence, and the intimidating atmosphere of the university facility now felt energizing rather than overwhelming. She had proven to herself and everyone watching that she belonged in this competition, and her second attempt would be about discovering just how fast she could really go. Coach Williams began the countdown sequence for Maria's second attempt, but this time the silence in the gymnasium felt anticipatory rather than nervous. The other athletes had seen enough of Maria's technique to recognize that she was capable of something extraordinary, and everyone present understood that they might be witnessing a record-breaking performance. Maria's second attempt began with even more explosive power than her first. The hours of training in the Cedar Valley Community Center had prepared her for this moment, but the competition environment had elevated her performance to a level she had never reached before. Every element of her technique felt perfectly synchronized, and she could sense that she was moving faster than she had ever moved in her life. The middle phase of Maria's performance was a blur of perfect execution and sustained intensity. Frank was no longer shouting encouragement, he was watching in amazement as Maria demonstrated athletic ability that exceeded even his highest expectations for her potential. The other competitors had fallen completely silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something exceptional. As Maria approached the finish line, she could feel that this attempt was significantly faster than her first. The timing seemed effortless despite the increased speed, and she maintained perfect form even as she pushed herself beyond what she had thought possible just hours earlier. When she crossed the finish line, she immediately turned toward the timing equipment, hoping to see confirmation of what her body had told her about the quality of her performance. Coach Williams stared at the digital display for several seconds before announcing the time. 47.02 seconds. Maria had not only broken Jennifer Walsh's 12-year-old record, she had shattered it by more than 0.2 of a second. The gymnasium erupted in celebration as the other competitors and coaches congratulated Maria on an achievement that none of them had expected when the day began. Frank reached Maria first, embracing her with tears in his eyes as the magnitude of what had just happened began to sink in. Maria had traveled from a small-town gym to a university facility and broken a record that serious athletes had been chasing unsuccessfully for 12 years. But, more than that, she had proven that talent and determination could overcome every advantage that money and institutional support could provide. The drive back to Cedar Valley was a blur of phone calls and celebration as word of Maria's record-breaking performance spread throughout their small community. Frank called Mr. Peterson at the hardware store, who immediately closed early to spread the news throughout town. Carlos received a call from Maria while he was working at the grocery store, and his excited reaction drew customers and co-workers into the celebration. By the time Maria and Frank arrived back in Cedar Valley that evening, news of the broken record had reached everyone in town. The Cedar Valley Chronicle was preparing a front-page story for the next day's edition, and the local radio station had already announced Maria's achievement during their evening news segment. The woman who had been quietly training at the community center for 2 years had become Cedar Valley's biggest celebrity overnight. But, for Maria, the most meaningful moment came when she walked into her family's home that evening and saw the pride in her parents' eyes. Carmen and Miguel had always supported their daughter, but they had also worried that her dreams were too big for someone from their small town. Now they understood that Maria hadn't been chasing impossible dreams. She had been preparing for an inevitable breakthrough that just required the right moment and the right stage. The record-breaking performance had qualified Maria for the regional competition at the University of Houston, but it had also done something more important. It had proven that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is exactly the person who will leave them speechless. The Monday morning after Maria's record-breaking performance felt surreal as she walked through the familiar aisles of Peterson's hardware store. Customers who had barely acknowledged her existence for 3 years now stopped their shopping to congratulate her and ask about her training. The front page of the Cedar Valley Chronicle featured a large photo of Maria at the finish line, with the headline "Local Woman Shatters 12-Year Athletic Record." For the first time in her life, Maria Santos was famous. Mr. Peterson had framed the newspaper article and hung it behind the cash register, where every customer would see it. He told everyone who would listen that he had always known Maria was special, conveniently forgetting his earlier concerns about her unrealistic goals. But Maria didn't mind the selective memory. She was grateful for his support when it had mattered most, and she understood that people needed to process extraordinary achievements in their own way. The phone calls started before the store opened and continued throughout the day. Local television news stations from San Antonio and Houston wanted interviews. High school coaches from around the state called to ask about Maria's training methods. Most surprisingly, she received calls from 3 different sports agents who specialized in representing track and field athletes, each offering to discuss career opportunities and endorsement potential. Frank Morrison arrived at the hardware store during Maria's lunch break, carrying a folder full of printouts and looking more excited than Maria had ever seen him. He had spent the morning researching the implications of Maria's record-breaking performance and making phone calls to contacts in the regional athletic community. What he had learned changed everything about Maria's immediate future and long-term possibilities. The first revelation was that Maria's time of 47.02 seconds didn't just break the state record, it ranked her among the top 5 performers in the country for the current year. The national record stood at 45.89 seconds, set by Olympic qualifier Amanda Richardson in 2019, which meant Maria was now just over a second away from national record territory. Frank had assumed Maria's achievement was regionally significant, but the research revealed she had immediately entered elite-level competition. The second revelation was that Maria's performance had automatically qualified her for the national championships in Eugene, Oregon, scheduled for June 15. The qualifying standard was 47.50 seconds, which Maria had beaten by nearly half a second. Frank had been focused on the regional competition in Houston, but Maria's record-breaking time had opened doors to the highest level of domestic competition in the sport. The most stunning revelation was a phone call Frank had received from Coach Sarah Martinez at the University of Texas. Coach Martinez had been following Texas athletic records for 15 years, and she had never seen someone improve from unknown status to elite performance so quickly. She wanted to meet Maria personally and discuss training opportunities that could help her continue developing at the elite level. Maria listened to Frank's report with growing amazement and mounting anxiety. 6 months earlier, she had been an unknown hardware store employee whose biggest athletic achievement was winning a company picnic challenge. Now she was being discussed in the same conversations as Olympic qualifiers and university athletic programs. The progression felt too fast to be real, yet the phone calls and newspaper coverage proved it was all happening. The regional competition at the University of Houston, which had seemed like the ultimate goal just days earlier, now felt like a stepping stone to much larger opportunities. Frank suggested that Maria should use the Houston competition as preparation for the national championships, focusing on technique refinement rather than simply trying to win. The goal would be to develop the consistency needed for elite-level competition while testing her performance under increased pressure and media attention. Maria's family struggled to process the sudden transformation of their quiet daughter into a nationally ranked athlete. Carmen worried that the attention and pressure would overwhelm Maria, while Miguel expressed concerns about the financial implications of elite-level training and travel. Carlos was thrilled by his sister's success but worried that she would outgrow their small town and leave Cedar Valley behind as she pursued opportunities in the larger athletic world. The conversation that evening around the Santos family dinner table was unlike any they had ever had. Maria tried to explain that she felt the same person she had been a week earlier, but everyone could see that the circumstances of her life had changed dramatically. The sports agents wanted her to consider relocating to training facilities in California or Florida. The university coaches were discussing scholarship opportunities that would require leaving Cedar Valley immediately. Most challenging for Maria was the realization that her record-breaking performance had created expectations that far exceeded her original goals. She had started training to see how fast she could go, but now people were discussing medal potential and professional athletics careers. The innocent joy of personal improvement had been replaced by pressure to continue achieving at levels that few athletes ever reached. Frank recognized the emotional complexity of Maria's situation and suggested that they take time to make decisions carefully rather than rushing into commitments based on initial excitement. He recommended that Maria continue her current training routine through the Houston competition while gradually exploring the elite-level opportunities that had become available. The key was maintaining the mental approach that had created her breakthrough while adapting to the increased expectations and attention. The week leading up to the Houston competition became a crash course in managing athletic celebrity at the regional level. Maria received interview requests from sports blogs and regional magazines. Her story resonated with people because it represented the possibility that extraordinary ability could emerge from ordinary circumstances, but the constant attention made it difficult for Maria to focus on the technical preparation that had created her success. Coach Martinez from the University of Texas visited Cedar Valley on Thursday evening to meet Maria and observe one of her training sessions. The community center gym had never hosted a Division I athletic coach, and word of the visit spread quickly throughout town. By the time Coach Martinez arrived, more than 50 people had gathered to watch Maria train, creating an atmosphere that was both supportive and overwhelming. Coach Martinez was impressed by Maria's raw ability and work ethic, but she was also concerned about the limitations of training in an uncertified facility with improvised equipment. She explained that elite-level performance required specialized coaching, sports science support, and training environments designed specifically for developing maximum athletic potential. The community center gym had served Maria well during her development phase, but continued improvement would require access to resources that Cedar Valley couldn't provide. After watching Maria's training session, Coach Martinez made an offer that stunned everyone present. The University of Texas was prepared to offer Maria a full athletic scholarship, including housing, meals, tuition, and access to their elite training facilities and coaching staff. The offer was contingent on Maria's performance at the Houston competition, but Coach Martinez made it clear that the university was confident in Maria's potential for continued improvement at the collegiate level. The scholarship offer represented everything Maria had never dared to dream about. Full university education, elite-level coaching, training partners who could challenge her to continue improving, and the opportunity to compete against the best collegiate athletes in the country. But accepting the offer would mean leaving Cedar Valley, leaving her job at the hardware store, and entering a world of athletic competition where her record-breaking performance would be just the entry point rather than the ultimate achievement. Maria asked for time to consider the offer and discuss it with her family. Coach Martinez understood the magnitude of the decision and encouraged Maria to take all the time she needed. She also invited Maria to visit the UT campus after the Houston competition to experience the training facilities and meet the athletes she would be training alongside if she accepted the scholarship. The Santos family spent hours discussing the scholarship offer, weighing the opportunities against the challenges of entering an unfamiliar world of elite athletics. Carmen worried about Maria's emotional readiness for the pressure and competition of university-level athletics. Miguel struggled with the financial implications of supporting Maria's athletic career if the scholarship didn't work out. Carlos encouraged his sister to pursue every opportunity while she had the chance. Frank's perspective was particularly valuable because he understood both the athletic potential and the personal sacrifices involved in elite-level competition. He believed Maria had the talent to succeed at the university level, but he also knew that success would require adapting to training methods, competition pressure, and lifestyle demands that were completely different from what she had experienced in Cedar Valley. The decision was complicated by Maria's deep connection to her hometown and the people who had supported her development. Mr. Peterson had given her flexible work schedules to accommodate training. Frank had volunteered countless hours as her coach and mentor. The community center had provided free access to training facilities. Leaving Cedar Valley would mean leaving behind the support system that had made her breakthrough possible. As the Houston competition approached, Maria realized that her performance would influence more than just her athletic career. A strong showing would validate the scholarship offer and open doors to elite-level training that could lead to national and international competition. But her performance would also determine whether she had the consistency needed to justify the faith that Coach Martinez and the University of Texas were placing in her potential. The pressure was intense, but it was different from the pressure she had felt during the qualification trial at Southwest Texas State. That pressure had been about proving she belonged in competitive athletics. The pressure surrounding the Houston competition was about proving she could continue improving at the elite level while managing expectations and attention that would only increase as she climbed higher in the athletic hierarchy. Maria's final training session in Cedar Valley before traveling to Houston was emotional for everyone involved. Frank had pushed her harder than ever during preparation, but he had also tried to maintain the joy and personal satisfaction that had motivated Maria's initial improvement. The community center gym was filled with townspeople who had come to wish Maria well and to witness what might be her final training session as a Cedar Valley resident. The drive to Houston with Frank felt like a pilgrimage toward a future that Maria couldn't quite imagine but knew she had to pursue. The woman who had walked into the community center gym 2 years earlier as an unknown hardware store employee was now traveling to compete against university athletes and regional champions, carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire town that had learned to believe in impossible achievements through her example. The University of Houston Gymnasium was unlike any athletic facility Maria had ever seen. Professional-grade equipment, perfect lighting, and seating for over 2,000 spectators created an environment that made the Southwest Texas State Time Trial seem like a casual practice session. As Maria and Frank walked through the competitor entrance on competition morning, they were greeted by the sight of athletes warming up with the precision and intensity of people who had been preparing for this moment their entire lives. Registration took place in a corridor lined with banners commemorating decades of athletic achievements and record-breaking performances. Maria received her competitor packet, including a professional racing number, timing chip, and information packet that detailed the day's schedule and procedures. For the first time, she was being treated as a serious competitor rather than an unknown participant, but the official recognition only intensified the pressure she felt to justify her presence among these elite athletes. The warm-up area buzzed with conversations between athletes and coaches who clearly knew each other from years of competition at this level. University team uniforms dominated the space, representing programs from across the Southwest region. Maria felt conspicuous in her simple training gear, accompanied by Frank who looked distinctly different from the professional coaches surrounding them. But she had learned to convert feelings of displacement into focus and determination. Frank guided Maria through a warm-up routine designed to prepare her physically and mentally for competition while avoiding the intimidation factor of comparing herself to other athletes. He had studied video of the top competitors and identified 3 athletes who posed the most serious challenge to Maria's chances of winning the regional title. Each brought different strengths and competitive experience that would test different aspects of Maria's preparation and mental toughness. The first major challenger was Rebecca Thompson from the University of Arkansas, a senior who had been competing at the regional level for 4 years. Rebecca's technique was flawless, refined by years of professional coaching and consistent competition against elite opponents. Her personal best of 47.58 seconds was slower than Maria's record, but Rebecca had the advantage of knowing exactly how to perform under pressure and manage the tactical aspects of championship competition. The second challenger was Kelly Rodriguez from Texas A&M, a junior who had set her personal best of 47.34 seconds just 3 weeks earlier. Kelly was known for her competitive intensity and ability to perform better when pressure mounted. She had won the regional title the previous year and would be competing on familiar territory with strong support from coaches and teammates who understood championship competition strategies. The most dangerous challenger was Christina Hayes from the University of Texas, a sophomore who had emerged as a serious contender only during the current season. Christina's personal best of 47.19 seconds was just fractionally slower than Maria's record, but she had achieved that time while competing against the highest level of collegiate competition in the country. Christina was Coach Martinez's current star athlete, and her presence at the regional competition demonstrated the respect that UT coaches had for this level of competition. As Maria observed her competitors during warm-ups, she realized that each brought advantages she didn't possess. Rebecca had years of experience managing championship pressure. Kelly had tactical knowledge gained from previous regional titles. Christina had been training in elite facilities with professional coaching support throughout her development. But Maria had something that none of them possessed, the hunger and determination of someone who had achieved the impossible once and was determined to prove it wasn't a fluke. The technical meeting for competitors provided Maria with her first real understanding of championship competition procedures. Unlike the casual atmosphere of qualification trials, regional championships followed strict protocols designed to ensure fairness and accuracy under the intense scrutiny of coaches, officials, and media representatives. Every detail from warm-up schedules to post-competition drug testing was regulated and monitored. Media attention was significantly more intense than Maria had experienced during her qualification trial. Regional newspapers and television stations were covering the competition, and several national track and field websites had sent reporters specifically to observe Maria's performance. The story of an unknown small-town athlete breaking a 12-year record had captured attention throughout the athletic community, creating expectations that both motivated and intimidated Maria. Frank used the media attention as a teaching opportunity, helping Maria understand that managing external pressure was now part of her athletic responsibilities. He reminded her that the reporters and cameras were focused on her achievement rather than looking for failure, and that she should embrace the recognition as validation of the hard work that had brought her to this level of competition. The competition format added tactical complexity that Maria had never encountered during her training or qualification trials. Rather than simply trying to achieve the fastest possible time, competitors needed to balance speed with the strategic considerations of advancing through preliminary rounds to the championship final. The top 6 times from the preliminary round would advance, which meant Maria needed to run fast enough to secure advancement while saving energy for the final. Coach Martinez approached Maria during the final warm-up period to offer encouragement and tactical advice. She explained that preliminary rounds often produced times that were slower than athletes' personal bests, because competitors focused on qualifying safely rather than risking everything for maximum speed. Coach Martinez suggested that Maria target a time around 47.8 seconds, which would almost certainly secure advancement while allowing her to race more aggressively in the final. The preliminary round unfolded exactly as Coach Martinez had predicted, with most athletes running controlled races designed to advance safely rather than set personal records. Rebecca Thompson won the first heat with a time of 48.12 seconds, well below her personal best but fast enough to establish her as the early favorite for the championship. Kelly Rodriguez took the second heat in 48.03 seconds, demonstrating the tactical control that had made her successful in previous regional competitions. Maria was scheduled to compete in the third and final heat, alongside Christina Hayes and 2 other athletes who were considered contenders for advancement to the final. The head-to-head matchup with Christina would provide the first direct comparison between Maria's record-breaking ability and the current elite level of collegiate competition in Texas. As Maria prepared for her preliminary race, she felt calmer than she had expected. The intimidating atmosphere of championship competition had become energizing rather than overwhelming, and the presence of elite competitors had elevated her focus rather than creating anxiety. Frank reminded her that she had already proven her ability to perform under pressure, and that her goal was simply to execute the technique that had broken the state record just weeks earlier. The preliminary race began with Maria positioned in lane 4, directly next to Christina Hayes in lane 5. The start was clean and controlled, with all athletes settling into their rhythm quickly and efficiently. Maria felt immediately comfortable with the pace, recognizing that her competitors were running within themselves rather than pushing maximum speed during the preliminary round. Through the first half of the race, Maria stayed within striking distance of Christina while running well within her capabilities. The tactical advice from Coach Martinez proved accurate. The pace was controlled enough that Maria felt strong and relaxed rather than straining to maintain contact with the leaders. Frank's coaching had prepared her for exactly this type of tactical situation, where patience and confidence were more important than raw speed. The second half of the preliminary race provided Maria's first taste of tactical complexity in championship competition. Christina began to increase the pace gradually, testing whether the other competitors had the speed and strength to respond. Maria matched the increase comfortably, but she could sense that 2 of the other athletes were beginning to struggle with the elevated tempo. Maria's preliminary time of 47.89 seconds was exactly what Coach Martinez had recommended, fast enough to advance to the final as the second seed, but controlled enough to preserve energy for the championship race. Christina won the heat in 47.72 seconds, establishing herself as the top qualifier and creating the anticipated head-to-head matchup for the regional title. The 2-hour break between preliminary rounds and finals gave Maria time to process the significance of reaching her first championship final. Just 6 weeks earlier, she had been an unknown athlete hoping to qualify for regional competition. Now she was preparing to race against the fastest athletes in the Southwest region, with a legitimate chance of winning the regional title and advancing to national-level competition. Frank used the break to review race tactics and help Maria visualize different scenarios for the championship final. He emphasized that Maria's record-breaking time had earned her respect from competitors and coaches, but that the final would be won by whoever executed best under the intense pressure of championship competition. The goal was to trust her preparation and run the race that had brought her to this level, regardless of what other competitors chose to do tactically. The atmosphere in the gymnasium changed dramatically as evening approached and finals competition began. The seating area filled with spectators, including university athletic boosters, local media, and family members who had traveled to support the competitors. Maria's parents and Carlos had driven from Cedar Valley, along with Mr. Peterson and a dozen community members who wanted to witness their hometown hero compete for a regional championship. The warm-up period before finals felt completely different from preliminary preparation. Maria could sense the increased intensity from all competitors, the recognition that tactical considerations were no longer relevant and that the championship would be decided by whoever was willing to push themselves furthest beyond their comfort zone. Frank reminded her that she had broken the state record by embracing rather than fearing that exact type of pressure. As competitors were called to the line for the championship final, Maria felt the familiar transformation that had carried her through breakthrough performances at Southwest Texas State and during her record-breaking trial. The anxiety and pressure compressed into focused determination, and the intimidating atmosphere became a source of energy rather than distraction. She was no longer the unknown athlete hoping to prove she belonged, she was a legitimate contender for the regional title. The championship final featured 6 athletes who represented the best of Southwest regional competition. Rebecca Thompson in lane 2, with 4 years of experience and flawless technique. Kelly Rodriguez in lane 3, the defending champion with tactical expertise. Maria in lane 4, the record holder who had emerged from complete obscurity. Christina Hayes in lane 5, representing the strongest collegiate program in the region. And 2 additional qualifiers whose presence in the final demonstrated the depth of talent at this level of competition. Frank offered final words of encouragement that focused on trusting her preparation and embracing the opportunity to compete against the best. He reminded Maria that she had already achieved more than anyone had thought possible, and that the final was her chance to determine exactly how fast she could go when everything was on the line. The woman who had walked into Cedar Valley Community Center 2 years earlier was about to discover whether her impossible dreams were actually inevitable achievements waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The University of Houston Gymnasium fell into complete silence as the 6 finalists took their positions for the regional championship race. Maria could hear her own heartbeat and the barely audible hum of the timing equipment as she settled into the starting blocks in lane 4. To her left, Kelly Rodriguez bounced nervously in lane 3, while Christina Hayes in lane 5 appeared calm and controlled. The defending champion versus the record holder versus the unknown athlete who had shattered expectations, it was the kind of matchup that created athletic legends. Frank stood in the coach's area, his hands clenched as he watched Maria go through her final preparations. He had coached many athletes over the years, but he had never felt pressure like this. Maria represented more than just athletic achievement, she embodied the possibility that extraordinary performance could emerge from ordinary circumstances. Her success would validate every small-town athlete who had ever believed they could compete with the best, while failure would reinforce the conventional wisdom that elite athletics required elite resources. In the stands, Maria's family sat with the group of Cedar Valley supporters who had made the 3-hour drive to witness their hometown hero compete for a regional championship. Carmen clutched Miguel's hand, torn between pride in her daughter's achievements and anxiety about the pressure Maria was facing. Carlos held a handmade sign reading "Cedar Valley Believes," surrounded by neighbors who had watched Maria transform from a hardware store employee into the fastest woman in Texas. The starter called for the athletes to come to their marks, and the gymnasium fell into the perfect silence that precedes moments of athletic truth. Maria felt the familiar sensation of time slowing down as she focused on the technical elements that had carried her to this moment. Her breathing was controlled, her muscles were loose and ready, and her mind was clear of everything except the execution sequence she had practiced thousands of times. At the signal to set, Maria rose into her starting position and felt the complete focus that had characterized her best performances. The world contracted to include only the track ahead of her and the internal rhythm that would guide her through the next 47 seconds. She was no longer thinking about records or championships or the expectations of everyone watching. She was simply prepared to discover how fast she could go when everything was perfect. The starting signal released Maria into the race with more explosive power than she had ever generated. The months of training in the Cedar Valley Community Center had prepared her for this moment, but the combination of perfect preparation and championship pressure elevated her performance to a level that surprised even Frank. She moved through the first phase of the race with technique that was both flawless and completely natural. Christina Hayes had planned to take the race out aggressively, using her tactical experience to control the early pace and put pressure on less experienced competitors. But Maria's explosive start neutralized that strategy immediately, as she moved to the front of the field with such authority that the other athletes had to abandon their race plans and respond to her unexpected speed. The first quarter of the race unfolded faster than any of the athletes had intended, with Maria setting a pace that was clearly aimed at a record-breaking time rather than tactical safety. Rebecca Thompson, with her years of championship experience, recognized immediately that this was not going to be a tactical race where patience and positioning would determine the winner. Maria was racing against the clock, and everyone else would have to decide whether they could match her audacious speed. Kelly Rodriguez, the defending champion, tried to stay within striking distance of Maria while conserving energy for what she expected would be a finishing kick. But, as the race progressed, it became clear that Maria's pace was not a tactical gamble that would lead to exhaustion in the later stages. She was running controlled speed that suggested she was prepared to maintain this intensity throughout the entire race. Frank watched from the coach's area in amazement as Maria moved through the race with the kind of controlled aggression that characterizes truly elite performances. Every technical element was perfect, but, more importantly, Maria was racing with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of achieving. The months of doubt and uncertainty had been replaced by the quiet certainty that comes with perfect preparation meeting perfect opportunity. At the halfway point, Maria had opened a gap of nearly 2 meters on the rest of the field, with Christina Hayes in second place and Kelly Rodriguez close behind in third. The pace was faster than the existing record split, which meant Maria was on track to break her own state record if she could maintain the intensity through the second half of the race. The crowd was beginning to sense that they might be witnessing something extraordinary. The third quarter of the race tested Maria's fitness and mental preparation in ways that training could only approximate. Championship races created a type of pressure that could only be experienced during actual competition, and this was the moment when years of preparation either proved sufficient or revealed their limitations. Maria felt strong and controlled, but she also knew that the most difficult phase of the race was approaching. Christina Hayes made her move during the third quarter, using her collegiate training and tactical experience to close the gap that Maria had opened early in the race. For several hundred meters, it appeared that Christina's strategy of patient racing and superior fitness would overcome Maria's early speed. The crowd noise increased as the two athletes moved closer together, creating the kind of head-to-head battle that produces memorable championship moments. But Maria's response to Christina's challenge revealed the mental toughness that had carried her from obscurity to elite-level competition in less than 2 years. Instead of panicking or trying to match Christina's tactics, Maria simply executed her race plan with the same precision and intensity that had characterized the early phases. She had trained for this exact situation, and her preparation proved equal to the challenge. The final quarter of the race became a pure test of speed, fitness, and determination. Maria maintained her lead despite Christina's sustained challenge, while Kelly Rodriguez moved into position to challenge for the victory if either of the leaders faltered. Rebecca Thompson, running in fourth place, was close enough to factor into the outcome if anyone made a tactical mistake in the final meters. Frank found himself holding his breath as Maria entered the final straight section with a slight lead over Christina and the race still undecided. Everything Maria had worked for during 2 years of training in Cedar Valley was condensing into the next 20 seconds of her life. The hardware store employee who had discovered her talent by accident was now 40 seconds away from either achieving her ultimate goal or learning that elite-level athletics required something she didn't possess. The final straight was a blur of perfect technique and sustained intensity as Maria drew on every ounce of preparation and determination she had developed over months of training. Christina Hayes was matching her stride for stride, but Maria could sense that her competitor was reaching the limit of what tactical fitness could achieve. The race would be won by whoever was willing to push furthest beyond their comfort zone in the final meters. With 50 meters remaining, Maria found another level of speed that surprised everyone watching, including herself. The explosive finishing ability that had first emerged during company picnic challenges in Cedar Valley now revealed itself on the championship stage, allowing Maria to pull away from Christina and establish a lead that could not be overcome in the remaining distance. Maria crossed the finish line with a gap of nearly 3 meters over Christina Hayes, who held on for second place ahead of Kelly Rodriguez in third. But the margin of victory was less important than the time displayed on the official scoreboard. 46.34 seconds. Maria had not only won the regional championship, she had obliterated her own state record by more than half a second and moved into range of the national record that had seemed impossibly distant just months earlier. The gymnasium erupted in celebration as the magnitude of Maria's achievement became clear to everyone present. She had traveled from unknown status to national-level performance in less than 6 months, proving that athletic excellence could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when talent met perfect preparation and unshakable determination. Frank reached Maria first, embracing her with tears streaming down his face as he struggled to process what he had just witnessed. The community center coach who had volunteered to help a small-town dreamer had just guided an athlete to a performance that ranked among the best in the country. Maria's achievement validated everything Frank had believed about the power of dedicated preparation and the potential that could be unlocked when someone refused to accept limitations. The Cedar Valley supporters in the stands were celebrating with the kind of joy that comes from witnessing the impossible become inevitable. Their hometown hero had not only won the regional championship but had done so with a performance that established her as a legitimate contender for national titles and international competition. The hardware store employee who had quietly trained at the community center had become one of the fastest women in America. Coach Martinez approached Maria during the celebration with an expression that mixed pride with amazement. The University of Texas coach had expected Maria to compete well at the regional level, but the performance she had just witnessed exceeded the highest expectations for collegiate athletic development. Maria's time would have won the NCAA Division I championship the previous year and ranked her among the top 3 performers in current collegiate competition. The post-race interviews were unlike anything Maria had ever experienced, as national media representatives sought to understand how someone could progress from unknown status to elite performance so rapidly. Maria's answers were honest and straightforward, crediting the support she had received from Frank, her family, and the Cedar Valley community, while acknowledging that she was still learning to process the dramatic changes in her circumstances and opportunities. The drive back to Cedar Valley that evening was triumphant but surreal as Maria tried to understand how completely her life had changed in less than 6 months. The woman who had walked into the community center gym as an unknown athlete was now returning as a regional champion and national-level competitor. The phone calls from agents and university coaches would intensify, and the decisions about her future would become even more complex and consequential. But, for Maria, the most meaningful part of the evening was the moment she walked into her family's home in Cedar Valley and saw the pride and amazement in her parents' eyes. Carmen and Miguel had always believed in their daughter, but they had never imagined that her dreams would lead to achievements that commanded national attention and respect. Their quiet support had helped create something extraordinary, and the entire family understood that Maria's success belonged to everyone who had believed in her potential when it seemed impossible to achieve. The regional championship was over, but Maria's journey was just beginning. The national championships in Eugene, Oregon awaited in June, along with opportunities and challenges that would test whether a small-town athlete could continue climbing toward the very highest levels of athletic achievement. But Maria had already proven that impossible dreams were simply achievements waiting for the right combination of preparation, opportunity, and unshakable determination to make them inevitable. The record that had stood for 12 years was gone, replaced by a new mark that reflected the power of believing in yourself when nobody else was ready to believe in you. And the woman who had achieved it understood that this was not the end of her story, but rather the beginning of a journey toward discovering just how far dedication and determination could carry someone who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible.